Okay, so let's start with the first item. The first item is represented by SSH in this lab, so we have to connect to the other VM we created. And this is quite interesting because SSH is the default protocol used to connect to a remote host securely. What is also important is to be capable of understand a secure configuration of SSH or not. So in this video I will show you at the beginning some basic commands to access a remote host via SSH, and then in the second part, which is not mandatory, we will study how we can make with 2 or 3 settings the configuration of SSH more secure. So first of all, let's connect to the remote VM. So this is the address of the remote VM that we spawned before. And then I also put a username which is the same we have here. So it's not mandatory, but yeah, it's, to better understand what it happens, it's okay. And then we can put a -v to show more details about SSH. We will only analyze few of them, and then let's go. So it prints some lines to understand, so it say which key is using, which identity, and so on and so forth. Not interesting in this moment. And then it asks ourselves if the authenticity of the remote host can be established by us. So it's the first time that we connect to the remote host, we have to say if we trust the remote host or not. This is useful to avoid man-in-the-middle attack where someone fakes to be another host. And so if we have saved the key of this host and we try to connect to this host afterwards, we will see that the key doesn't match, and SSH will tell us, okay, something nasty is happening here, please pay attention. So for the moment we say yes, and then it tries to authenticate via a key, so asymmetric ciphering, and yeah, we haven't a key so far, so it tries the next method of authentication, which is password. The password is NetLab, and so we are in our system. Now we can start to do our lab. So password authentication, SSH, very simple, very easy to set up. So the problem is that when we deal with password, we always have to type our password, we have to remember it, we have to share it with our members of the team, and when they leave the team, they still have the secret, so we have to change the password, for example, and so on. So it's really unpractical. And also I can type a password when I try to connect to the server, and I try to guess it, and maybe if the password is very easy, I can guess correctly, and so I'm in the system and I have an authorized access. In the following part of video, we will show how we can secure a bit an SSH server by disabling password authentication and relying on SSH key-based authentication. So having a key, a private key, a public key, a pair of keys that allow you to connect and to authenticate in a system. So this part is not mandatory, so if you are all interested in going on in the lab, please skip this part. Okay, so as we mentioned before, we used a password to authenticate, but it may be useful to use a key to do so. So how can we generate a key? We can do that using SSH keygen. So keygen will generate a key. You can simply go ahead, the basic setting put by SSH keygen are okay. So it will generate a private key here and a public key here. So this is the default path where SSH will look for keys, and so we are done. So we have our keys, our public key, our private key, and those keys have to be used by us to authenticate to another system. The point is that if we want to authenticate to another system with our key, we have to copy the public key on the remote system. So what we can do is to use another tool called SSH copy ID. Then we can simply type the only looking for the IP address of the remote VM. There. And then we are connecting to the system to copy the key. So we have to authenticate to the system because we have to be authorized to copy the key. It's done. So now when we try to copy to connect to the system, we also have some verbosity to see what it happens. We see that the authentication is not anymore, so we can use public key and password, and when our client offers our key, offer a way to connect via key, the authentication succeeds. And so we are okay, we have access to our system without typing any password. The problem is that, okay, we are using a password, public key, but the password is still allowed. So if someone has not our key, try to connect, he can still try to guess the password. And what we can do to avoid this is to change the configuration of our server, disabling the password. So I go to the file where we save the configuration. So it's etc sshd config. So it's where the daemon configuration, so the SSH daemon configuration is saved. I put no as password authentication, and now I have to restart or reload at least the SSH daemon. I did a restart, it works fine. So if we try again to connect, we will see that we only have public key as an authentication method that is allowed, and if we try to connect with another VM, so the VM that I created before and was useless so far, so we try to, okay, MATLAB, and then here's okay, we always have to trust the remote server, the identity, but then we get a permission denied. Why? Because in this VM we do not have the key that we had created before, and we have copied on the remote host, and so here we cannot enter the system, and we can we are also unable to type a password, to guess a password. So the system is more secure because only if you have the key you can enter the system. Obviously, if you have lost your key, you are doomed because it's impossible for you to enter the system. So if the VM is attached to some cloud provider, the cloud provider can have some agent inside that will re-update the key. But yeah, it's kind of a strange behavior. So the basic behavior is that if you secure your SSH VM without password authentication, and if you lose your key, you are done. You cannot access your system anymore via SSH. This is way more secure than the having password. So yeah, pay attention to your key, but it's a bit more secure. So thanks for your attention, and we will see you in next video where we discuss the creation of a VM.